Thank you very much. For the edification of the committee, I've just been advised that there's been a ceasefire announced in Gaza. Before we all celebrate, though, obviously we're all going to want to see how that executes. With that, Senator Murphy, you're up, and then we're going to take that short break.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. That is indeed good news. Senator Rubio, I want to talk to you about a topic that I think is going to be real trouble for you and for U.S. national security interests, at least for the first few minutes of my time, and that's the growing personal financial entanglement of President Trump, his family, and Middle East governments. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. For nearly 8 years, the Trump organization has been pursuing a real estate deal to build a hotel complex in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. During President Trump's first term, the Trump organization actually voluntarily committed to refrain from pursuing real estate deals with foreign companies, especially those that are backed by foreign governments. And so the deal didn't go through. And then it remained stalled for the entirety of the Biden administration. And then magically, 30 days after the November election, Saudi Arabia's biggest construction company that's affiliated with the government announced that the deal was going forward alongside an additional $200 million deal for a Trump property in Oman. Now, it used to be that somebody with these big financial business interests would come into government and take actions like setting up a blind trust or divestment in order to make sure there was no connection between their personal financial interests and the business they were conducting in government. But President Trump has just done the opposite, right? Over the last 8 years, while he was in office and since he's been out of office, he and his family have become more deeply dependent on revenue from governments in the Middle East. During his last presidency, Middle East interests sent about $10 million to Trump properties. After he left office, Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who was his primary Middle East envoy, was handed $2 billion in investment by the Saudis, even though a Saudi investment board said the investment was a bad business decision. That investment actually comes up for renewal in 2026, giving the Saudis massive leverage over the Trump family. And then to make matters worse, right after the election, the Trump organization said that in this term, the president-elect's second term, it would drop its previous prohibition on doing new deals in the Middle East with private foreign companies aligned with foreign governments. So the Trump organization is going to be signing new business deals in the Middle East with private companies that have connections to foreign governments at the very moment that you are going to be conducting sensitive diplomacy in these countries. That's just extraordinary. Never before in the history of this country has a president been, literally receiving cash from foreign governments and from foreign companies that are backed by foreign governments in the middle of their term. If you or I had done this as senators, we would be in violent violation of Senate ethics rules. That's not permitted on the Foreign Relations Committee. And so I guess my question to you is a pretty simple one. Do you see how this fundamentally compromises your diplomatic efforts? Do you have an issue, or will you raise an issue with the president about his growing financial connection with the governments that you're going to be negotiating with?
Well, first of all, I am not neither authorized nor in any position to give you sort of any insights into any of these arrangements you've pointed out. You mentioned Jared Kushner as an example. He's a private citizen, happens to be a Floridian. I don't know what, if any, engagement he has in the work that's going on now. I can tell you what I know. Obviously, I'm not in the State Department yet, but I can tell you as an example, the president's envoy to that region, who is charged, Steve Witkoff, who is charged with being an envoy towards reaching an accommodation between the Israelis and the Saudis, has been working cooperatively and together with the Biden administration. And in fact, I dare to say that all involved deserve credit for the ceasefire that the chairman's just announced. But Steve Witkoff's been a critical component of it, and he has been involved in it from day one. I think the broader consideration about whether we want to see a Saudi-Israeli mutual recognition and relationship would be one of the most historic developments in the history of the region. for all the factors we've discussed here today. It would be, and one of the impediments to it has been this conflict and the ongoing conflict and the lack of a ceasefire. I also think it's going to be important for the Saudis and others to be participants in post-conflict stabilization efforts in Gaza and beyond. So all I can tell you is that what I've said from the very beginning, from the opening statement, and that is our foreign policy is going to be driven, as the President's made abundantly clear, by whether some action makes America is in the interest of the United States and our national security. And that's what it's going to be driven by, and that's how all these policies should be judged by, and that's certainly the job that I believe I've been tasked with executing on.